without any further ado, we're at 8:02 right now. Okay, we still have a minute. Let's wait for a few more people to join, then we will start. Let me look at chat for another minute, then we'll start. How are you guys doing here on a Sunday night? Very, very nice. Hello, hello, hello. Someone says yesterday also you're asking Node streams. Happy to discuss it. I don't think we've not covered a lot of things in core Node.js. Akash, make a note. I can create a video on it. Serious help. Oh my god. Let me bookmark this. And what is the other one? Yeah, I know. I mean that's why on purpose. I saw this yesterday. But the format we're using, you can write a script for it, or there are easier ways to download as well. Question is, do you want to restrict downloads? The answer is probably yes. If you can do it on herkira.classics.co.in, then definitely create a video. Here, you know the code is written to deliberately not allow downloads. So go to herkira.classics.co.in, go to cohort 3, and any of the latest videos over here. Try downloading any one of these. If you can download these, then we should definitely get in touch. I'll also do a bounty. If you are able to download any of these, this you shouldn't be able to download. I know app.access.com you can download. And I wouldn't say it's on purpose, but I know that. And we'll see if you have to fix it. Not in a rush to fix that. Because if Herkira.classics wala algorithm works, we can just get an API and use the same algorithm on app.100xfs.com. Cool. Great suggestion though, and great try. Alrighty. With that, let's get right into it. We'll kick things off with Recoil today. Let me set the context for the class. Learn about Recoil, which is one of many state management libraries. Until now, hopefully you understand what is state management. Thoda to we have discussed about it. We have used the use state hook, and the use state hook is one way to manage state. There are other ways as well. Redux is a popular state management library. MobX is a popular state management library. Zustand is one. Learning about today. Why would you want to use an external library, Harkirat, when useState hook is already there? If you use an external library, it will increase your bundle size. Whenever user comes to your website like app.100xfs.com, it will take them some extra time to download the Recoil code base to their website or to their browser. Why would you want to use an external library? The answer is, of course, it gives you some benefits, and it makes your life easier as a developer. It gives you some performance benefits. We'll understand what those are. But the logic remains the same. Then don't use any library, right? Write all the code yourself. The purpose of using a library is as a developer, it makes your life a little bit easier, even if it increases the bundle size by a little bit. So we're going to understand about Recoil. How many of you already know Recoil? We'll start from a poll as always. Do you already understand everything that's mentioned over here? One extra thing we're going to learn about is Memo, which is another API that React provides, but everything else is Recoil related. Do you already know Recoil? Oh wow, not a lot of people. 85% don't know. Whatever, 82% now, yeah. 15% know this. So 15% very boring class. We're not even discussing atom family and selector family today. Just atoms and selectors. Feel free to drop off. This might be the only new thing you learn today. All right. With that, through some examples, let's try to understand Recoil. I'm going to kick things off with introducing Recoil. One small call out again. I'll do another webinar today at the end of the class on another platform. If you want to stick around, that would be super helpful. We have around 400-500. Would be nice to test that platform with 400-500 people. End of class though, so you can also come back if you want to lead. Alrighty. Introducing Recoil. There is a very nice video that the author made. I saw this around 2020 when it was introduced. Yeah, 2020 Recoil was introduced. I'm sure this video is like 4 or 5 years old. He introduced how Recoil is better than Redux, better than native state management. So you should go through this video in case you feel like diving into deeper into how it works. I think this guy's the author. I also think he used to work at React before. I could be wrong. So they introduced a state management library. What is Recoil? State management library for React that provides a way to manage global state with fine-grained control. It provides a way to manage global state. What is global state? For a LinkedIn-like application, let me open LinkedIn. What would global state be? It would be things like, what is my notification count? What is my this number? What is this number? What are my messages over here? What are the posts that I have? Everything that is dynamic. Trending now would be an array. posts would be an array, my network notification count would be a number, notification count would be a number, message count would be a number. All the dynamic bits on LinkedIn is what is stored in the state. We discussed this a while back when we introduced states and components. I shared that this is what states and components look like. Okay, for a very big application, you will separately create all your components, be it a top bar component, be it a posts component, and everything else over here is the state. Things like notification count, message count, so on and so forth, and maybe the posts, which will be an array of, whatever posts. This is the global state that we are talking about. Okay, until now, we have been holding this in various use states, basically doing something like const notification count, comma, set notification count equal to use state 0, let's say. This is what we have been doing until now. Hopefully, if you have gone through the classes before, you already understand the use state hook and why it is used to manage state. But today, we will do it a different way. Today, we will go through recoil that lets you manage the global state. Recoil minimizes unnecessary renders by only re-rendering components that depend on the changed atoms. This part is one important thing that we will discuss. But basically, if this is your global state, if notification count ever changes from 1 to 2, what should re-render? Only the top bar should re-render. Only this component should actually re-render. Even the top bar shouldn't re-render. Just this much should re-render. Nothing else changed on the page. Why do you want to re-render it? Why do you want to recalculate? Okay, what does this look like? Only this much is good enough. So recoil lets you do it. Can you do it using useState? You sort of can, but your life will become really hard. You will have to make sure that this specific state variable is defined in the top bar component. Only then will you be able to do it. We can see that as well. But usually, if you are maintaining a global state like this, if notification count changes, if your global state changes, everything will end up re-rendering. And the goal is to minimize the number of re-renders. If you are using a library like React, you want to minimize the number of re-renders that are happening. Recoil lets you do that. We will see this in action very soon. The performance of a React app is measured by the number of re-renders. I mean, a bunch of other things, but one thing you want to minimize is the amount of re-rendering that is happening. Each render is expensive and you should aim to minimize it. Great video to look at maybe after the class. The key concepts in recoil include atoms and selectors. There are a bunch of other concepts that we can also discuss. We will probably discuss in an offline video or next week, one of the two, most probably offline video. Atoms and selectors. If you understand these two, you are good for most applications. These two will be enough for you to replace useState everywhere. You don't even need to use the useState hook anymore. You can simply use atoms and selectors. These are two terms that recoil introduces. I repeat, these are two terms that recoil introduces. This isn't a React concept. This is a recoil concept. Okay, if you want to use this library, you have to understand what are atoms and what are selectors. Okay, so what are we doing to recap? We are understanding the recoil library. It is a performant library. It minimizes the number of re-renders that you have in your application as the global state changes. To be able to use recoil, you need to understand atoms and selectors. Let's go to the third slide. Oh, I haven't shared the slides, have I? So let me paste them in chat. Seems like someone, oh no, one. These are the slides for today. Recoil versus context API. Before we get into recoil, we have already discussed one mildly optimal way to do state management. We understood about the context API last week. This is a great way to do state management. This isn't the only way, but React already provides you something for state management. Why do you need recoil? We will see. But let's recap context API very soon. very quickly. Let's create a simple counter application, and it should have two buttons, an increment button, a decrement button that increases/decreases the value of a variable. What do we want to do? We want to create something like this: an increase component, a decrease component, and a count component, where, if you click on the increase button, this count goes up. Click on the decrease button, this count goes down. Notice the problem already. Already you are seeing when I click on one of these buttons, just one component doesn't re-render. Three components re-render. This re-renders, this re-renders, and this re-renders. That is problematic. That is why recoil is better than the context API. But let's quickly code it. For everyone who hasn't really been coding, only watching, this is a great time for you to code this yourself and recap the context API once. I am also going to code the same thing locally. Once we code this thing using the context API, then we will try to code this thing in recoil, and we will see. Okay, in recoil, when you click on the increase or the decrease button, only this part of your application re-renders, because only this is the dynamic thing that is changing. This and this, nothing changes in the state, and hence it doesn't make sense for them to re-render. What will the re-render do? Calculate the same state and put it again, or not change the state at all. Then why even calculate? Why even re-render these components? So let's understand this, and then we'll go from there. This will build up to something more important, which is the memo API. But let's quickly try to code this. I'm hoping I'm not going too fast, and this is just a recap of what we've done until now. I'm going to create a new folder where I'm going to initialize my React projects/cohort3, and here I'm going to create a fresh React @latest. Hopefully you guys are comfortable with this CLI by now. Week 11 part 2, or week 11 recoil is a good name for it. I'm going to select React as the framework. I'm going to select JavaScript as the language. I am going to open this in Visual Studio Code. Hopefully this is simple enough. Initializing a React project, we have done it many times until now. What happens after you initialize your React project using Vite? What are you supposed to do next? You are supposed to first install all the dependencies. So I'm in this folder. I opened the terminal. You can open it by clicking terminal, new terminal, and then I ran npm install to install all the dependencies. As you can see, a node modules folder has been created, and this folder has all the dependencies of this project, which are things like React, React DOM. You can find the dependencies in package.json right here, and even these. Let me go to the top level component source/app.jsx, and let me remove all the logic from here. I have removed all the logic. Let me start to create my counter application. Very simple stuff. Component number 1, which is going to be, let me increase the size a bit, increase, which is going to return a div, let's say, which has a button inside that says increase. Don't worry about the on-click functionality right now. Then we will have another button. I will call this one decrease. What does the decrease component do? It returns a button inside which I have written decrease. This guy I have written increase. Let me create a top level component next called counter, where I'm going to render the decrease component, render the increase component, and render a state variable called count. I haven't yet defined the state variable. I still have to define the state variable, but I'm going to render it over here. How do I define the state variable? There are two ways. You can use the context API. You can use the useState hook. Problem will remain the same eventually in both the cases. So it doesn't matter which one do you choose. In the slides, I'm using the context API. So I'm happy to use the context API. If we want to keep it simple, we can simply define a state variable. Let's kick things off by defining a simple state variable. Const count comma set count equal to use state 0. Now what do I have to do? I have to pass the set count variable over to decrease as well as increase. They are going to use it to increment the value and decrement the value. So I'm going to pass count over here, set count over here as a prop. I'm passing it down as a prop. Same thing over here. And in the increase and the decrease component, I'm going to destructure set count over here. I'm going to destructure set count over here and use it in the buttons on click handler. I said button on click equal to increase. I'm going to define a function here called increase, which will do what? It will set count to be C plus 1. If this is the original value C, I have set it to C plus 1. I'm incrementing the count value by 1. If you don't understand this syntax, there is another way to do it. You can pass count down as a prop, but by now you should be comfortable with this syntax. If not, you should Google this syntax or go back to the classes before. Similarly, this is the decrease component. So I need to replace this function name by decrease and set count to C minus 1. And similarly, over here, I'm going to define a function called increase. And when you click on the button, what are you going to do? Call the increase function, which will set count to be C plus 1. That is all you need to create a counter application. It's an unoptimal counter application. It re-renders more than it should, but it's great. And in most companies, people don't care. Most companies have code written, which, people don't care about re-renders for a long time, unless you're creating a game where FPS begin to matter, where performance matters a lot. If you're creating something like Figma or Canva, there you will put a lot of attention towards this. Most e-commerce website don't care about, optimizing re-rendering, but still they would use state management to make the life of a developer easier and, not drill down these components or drill down these state variables as props. Let me finally render the counter component here. To recap, I have an app component. It renders the counter component where I have defined my state value. I render the state variable over here. There is an increase and decrease component that I render, which takes set count as an argument or a prop. Whenever the button is clicked on the decrease component, I call set count with C minus 1. Whenever the button is clicked in the increase component, I called set count with C plus 1. Let's see, does this work? Let me open the terminal and run npm run dev. It tells me the application is deployed over here. When I go there, increases this specific number, decreases it. It's styled a little bit better because I have the default CSS files over here, app.css and index.css. If I remove them or make them empty, then the styles will also go away. This will be shoved to the top left of the screen. Question is this an optimal application? Does it re-render correctly? If I'm clicking on increase, what components should re-render? If I'm clicking on increase, should the counter component re-render? Probably not. This counter component, the container component, nothing really changed. I don't have, it should. Counter component has this count. So it definitely needs to re-render. The parent component should re-render. To make it a little bit optimum, let me also define a third component here. Increase is one component, this thing right here. Decrease is one component, this thing right here. Let me introduce a third component over here called current count, which will take what as an input? It will take the count as an input and render the count over here. Looks still the same, but rather than rendering count over here, I passed it down to a component so that ideally the parent component doesn't re-render. This counter component may nothing changed. I don't have count over here that I need to recalculate the parent component. I don't need to, or I shouldn't recalculate the parent component. This component should change. This shouldn't change. This shouldn't change. Ideally, only this guy should re-render because only this guy is actually using count. Only the current count component is actually using count. But does that happen? Let's see. If I right click on inspect and go to, for this you will need the React DevTools extension. If you don't have it, then you'll have to install it. Make sure you go to components, settings, and you have highlight updates when components render. What this will do is whenever you click, whenever the state changes, it will highlight what all components re-rendered. And when I click on this button, what all re-rendered, if you look at it, the parent also re-rendered, the first child also re-rendered, the second child also re-rendered, the third child also re-rendered. As I click on this, you can clearly see the boxes appear. Even if you can't tell that the parent container is re-rendering, let me tell you it is. But this though you can clearly tell if you ignore the outline that comes on this button. Other than the outline also, there is a box over here. There is a box over here. That is telling you, okay, when you click on a button, this re-renders, this re-renders. Does it need to re-render? Is there a number that has changed over here in the DOM? Iski shakal badli hai kya jara si bhi? Is there anything that changed over here? No. So you have written unoptimal code over here. What you have written is not optimal. Now for such a small application, it doesn't matter. So you don't care. But that is what Recoil provides you. If you use Recoil, which we will very soon, you will see that this problem goes away. Does this problem occur in the context API also? The answer is yes. If you go back to the video of context API, we have discussed the same problem. Okay, even when you use the context API, which was the title of this slide, Recoil versus context API. Even if you use the context API, which will make your code a little more complicated to look at, but even if you use the context API, you will still see, okay, this button also re-renders, this button also re-renders, the third component also re-renders. So doesn't matter if you use the context API or if you have raw state variables like we did, it will cause re-renders where it shouldn't, which is why this is slightly bad. State management using uState is slightly bad. Recoil mein, this wouldn't happen. So let's try to write some code and see, does Recoil optimize this a little bit more? Does using this external library get rid of the render of this button and the render of this button? Let's see. Let's go back to the code in the Recoil section. Now here we will have to introduce an external library. We will have to do a few things. So let's not read through the code. No, this is the right code. We probably should use the wrong code. 1 second. All right. Let's not dive into this code just yet. The Recoil code, even though it is present on this slide, let me tell you already, this code will fix it. But let's not dive into the right code yet. Let's write some bad code using Recoil first. And then we'll see how, Recoil fixes things. We have already done this in the context API class. I did this comparison over there. So I'm not going to redo this comparison, even though eventually we will be writing this code. Okay? What have we learned until this slide? This gave us context for today. This introduced the library. There is something called the Recoil library. Here we have written some bad code using uState, or you can also write some bad code using the context API. Next, we're going to introduce an atom in recoil. When we understand what is an atom, we will try to optimize our application and see, is our application really optimized? Let's get into atoms next. What are atoms? A recoil specific concept, not a React specific context. Just like Express has routers, recoil has atoms. It's a recoil specific concept. Atoms are units of state that can be read from and written to from any component. Sounds very similar to the use state hook. Use state hook also gives you units of state that can be read from and written to from any component. यही तो है use state. If I go to my code over here, I have defined a variable with the value and its setter. I can use this count variable in this component. I can update this count component in, let's say, the decrease component. So isn't use state the same thing? It lets you read and write data from any component. So it's very similar. It is, but under the hood, of course, it makes your application much more performant. When an atom's state changes, all the components that subscribe to that atom will re-render. The same thing happens in use state, no Harkirat? Whenever the count variable changes, whenever set count is called, we saw that this re-rendered. But we also saw that this something that hasn't really subscribed to count. ये increase function में थोड़ी हमने count भेजा है. We haven't really set down this count variable here. This also re-rendered, this also re-rendered, parent also re-rendered, everything re-rendered. You can optimize some of this using use state also, but you forget about optimizing it if you use recoil. So we are going to replace all of our use state logic now with atoms rather than using the use state hook that we were using until now. Again, what was the application? App component, which renders counter, where we had defined the state variable and sent it to various components. This I am going to define a different way now. I am going to define the state variable using atoms in recoil. To do that, what we have to do is step 1, install the external dependency recoil. Recoil is an external library, doesn't come bundled with React. So if you want to use recoil, you have to install it as a dependency. Let me close this. npm install recoil. That will install recoil into my project. It will bring the specific library to this code base. How can I confirm that this has worked? I can open the sidebar, go to node_modules over here, scroll down, and I will see recoil is present. PQR here. That means the recoil library is now present in our code base. Next thing you have to do is wrap your application inside the recoil root. Do we remember the context API's discussion? When we were using the context API, we were passing down state to various components. We had to wrap our application inside a provider. Similarly, when you are using recoil, the first thing you have to do, if you want to use recoil, if you want to use atoms, you have to wrap your application, this app component, inside the recoil root. That is step 2. Step 1 was installing recoil. Step 2 is wrapping our application inside the recoil root. Step 3 would be what? Replacing this with an atom. We don't want to use the use state hook anymore. We want to create an atom. So let's see how you can do that. To create an atom, this is what the syntax looks like. How did we create a state variable? Const x, set x equal to use state initial value. How do you create an atom? Const counter, let's say the name of my atom is counter, equal to atom. This comes from the recoil library. This is a function. You call this function with two things: the default value of this atom and a key you have to give it. A key means this is how I uniquely identify this atom. कल को you might create another atom called notification count. There the key would be notification count. You might create a third atom called message notification count. There the key would be message notification count. So you have to make sure this key is unique. Don't give the same key to two different atoms. If you do, you will see a runtime error in your console. So step 1, import atom from the library. Step 2, define your atom outside your component tree. You don't have to define the atom over here. You can define it outside your component tree. In fact, you can also describe it in a different file. So let's do that. In source, let's create a folder called store. Usually this is where all the state management things are stored. Create a folder called store, inside which, let's say, ideally you should create another folder called atoms, where I'm going to create my very first atom called counter. I have created a counter.js file in some deep nested folder. And here I'm going to first import atom from recoil and then export the atom that I'm creating. I want to create it, but also export it so that app.jsx can import it. So export const counter atom equal to call the atom function with two things. The default value, let's say the default value is 0, and a key, which let's say is counter, something like this. I have created an atom and exported it from here. Let me import this specific atom in app.jsx next. Code is very simple, also present in the slide, so you can copy from there as well in case you weren't able to follow along. This line will create an atom very similar to what I was doing over here. Only यहाँ पे आपको immediately मिल जाते हैं getters and setters. Here you get getters and setters immediately. If you are using the recoil library, then you have to do something extra. We'll come to what that is. But now I don't need this state variable anymore. I am not even going to pass down this state variable anywhere. This is what I'm doing. I'm removing all the props from everywhere. I have a simple, clean looking application where I'm not passing, increase the props down the prop chain. If you look at the application now, it looks much cleaner. The top level app component, which renders the counter component, which renders 3 different components. First one is supposed to render the count atom. We'll come to how that will be. Second one is supposed to change the count atom. Same for the third one. Question is, how can the counter component, or not the counter component, this guy doesn't need anything. This guy doesn't need count. This guy doesn't need set count. Current count needs the current value of this count atom. By default, it is 0. Eventually, it will increase. How can we do that? By using the use recoil value hook. What is the hook that we are using? Use recoil value of the atom. What was the atom? Counter atom. This counter atom I'm going to import from wherever I had created counter.js. Use recoil const count equal to use recoil value counter atom. As simple as that. This component has now subscribed to the value of this atom. What was recoil? If we go back to the slides, if you recall recoil, what did it say? Atoms are units of state that can be read and written from any components. When an atom's state changes, all components that subscribe to that atom will re-render. Have we created one component that has subscribed to that atom? The current count component. This guy is now subscribed to that atom. This guy isn't. This guy isn't. यहाँ पे क्या करना है? Here, do I want the value of count? No. I want the value of set count. I want access to the set count function so that I can call set count and update a value. So const set count equal to, I will now use the use set recoil state. Here I used use recoil value. Here I'm using use set recoil state counter atom. This component is subscribed to the value. This component is sort of subscribed to the setter. This component does not need access to the value. इसको सिर्फ setter चाहिए. This is how it got the setter for the decrease component and for the increase component. Same thing. Now I have set count in the right places. These two components. I have the current count in this current count component. I render all three of these in the global counter component, which is rendered in app. Let's see this in action. Then we'll do a poll. Okay, how many of you understood how to, number one, create an atom, and how to, number two, subscribe to that atom in the current count component. Subscribe to the setter in the increase and the decrease component. Let me go to the browser over here and refresh. Let me go back to the terminal and rerun the application. If I refresh and click on increase, do you notice a difference? What is re-rendering now? Only this. This is just an outline. This isn't the DevTools telling you this is re-rendering. It is just an outline that comes on this button. But can you see only the single component that is subscribed to the value is re-rendering? When I decrease, only this guy is re-rendering. Have I made my component a little more optimal? Yes. What did I use for it? Recoil. How did recoil does under the hood? You should go to that video. He explains a little bit. They use a tree-like data structure to figure out what has changed and only re-render that. But this guy and this guy, even though they are subscribed to set count, do not update, do not re-render. Do we understand this code that I've written? Let me create a gist of it and post it in the slides. So if you want, you can copy it. Counter.js. Just 1 second. Can we do a poll until then? Oh wow, we did not understand this. Only 75% understood this. That is totally fine. We will answer a few questions before we proceed. We'll take a small 5-minute break. 75% is pretty bad. So let's see what is up here. Let me look at Q&A. How is this different from the context API? That is a great question. It is different from the context API in terms of how it performs, re-renders, in terms of how you can, well, you can do a lot of things using recoil that you do using recoil, using the context API also. But whatever you do here can be done via Redux. Whatever you do in Redux can be done via recoil. But it does a lot of performance optimizations for you that the context API doesn't. If I use the context API right now, in fact, there is the code over here in, context API versus recoil. And if you go back to last week's context API video, you will see me make the real comparison between both of them. You'll see this optimizes re-renders a bit, which is one of many things it does. If the constructs that it gives you, selectors and atoms, we'll see selectors very soon. You'll see how you can, cut down state and only re-render certain parts. When a recoil state changes, when a context API state changes, everything re-renders. But when an atom changes, only things that are subscribed to the atom, and when we will see selectors, only things that are subscribed to the selectors re-render. So that is one of many benefits. We'll come to some of them, well, not today, but let me just show you. If this is your global store, which has, bunch of keys in using context API, whenever this store changes, all the components that are using things from this context APIs will re-render. But recoil gives you something else. You can have an atom which stores a very big state similarly. But from this atom, you can create multiple selectors. Selector 1. We'll come to selectors very soon. I'm just giving you a high level idea of why it's might be better. You can create multiple selectors which your components can subscribe to. So even if the big state object changed, only if this selector changed, only if this part of the state changed, I will re-render. Versus in the context API, if the store changes, if one key changes, everything that is subscribed to it, even if it is not using it, will re-render. That is one of many reasons you might want to use this. All right, opening Q&A again. Do setCount function be name? You can name it whatever you want. You don't have to, name can be anything. I didn't understand the setting part. All right, recap, quick recap. May you recap, all right. All gists are secrets. All gists are secret. Oh, you guys can't see the gists? Let me open them incognito. Now you can see it, they're public. All right, time to recap recoil. I am recapping, more specifically atoms. I am recapping this slide over here. After we go through this slide, we'll understand something else called memo. But before we get there, a lot of people are confused here. Let me recap. We have a counter application that looks like this. An app component. These are all the components we have. 5 components. How are we rendering these 5 components? Let's see. We have the global, not the global, but the top level app dot whatever, this app component, which renders what? It renders the counter component, which renders what? It renders 3 things. 1, 2, 3. It renders the increase component, the decrease component, and the current count component. So this is the structure of our application. The app component renders this guy. This guy renders this, and this. The problem with not using recoil is that whenever we changed something, this re-rendered, this re-rendered, this re-rendered, this re-rendered. 4 re-renders happened. But what did I do right now? I said components ko karo side pe. Define the components separately. Define the state, the counter, atom separately in a different file. I don't even care. This is the atom which I have described in a separate file. And I said, yaar, current count, you are the only one that will subscribe to its value. Only you care कि यहाँ पे क्या पड़ा है. Only you are going to read its value and render it. You are not going to read the value. You are not going to read the value. I said you two are going to read the updater. You will get the set counter variable access. You will be able to update the state. You don't need to access the state. So तुम दोनों में, if you look at increase and decrease, I have used the use set recoil state hook. I have said use set recoil state. I want to update you. That is what I am using over here. कि जो counter atom है, give me the updater for it. I don't want the value for it. Same thing I have done in the increase component. Give me the updater for it, not the value. But if you look at the counter component, current count component, this guy right here. Here I have said use recoil value. मुझे value दे भाई अपनी. I want to read on every updates. I am rendering all the updates over here. Whenever you update, please tell me so I can re-render. So I can re-put the new thing on the DOM. So this guy is subscribed to the state, or more technically, this guy is subscribed to the value of the counter atom, and these guys are just getting the setter. They just want to update. They just want to push an update here, which gets published to this guy. That way, only this guy re-renders. This and this never re-render. Let's see that in action. If I go to localhost colon 5173, in my Google Chrome, and click on increase, only the first component re-renders, current count. This and the parent component don't re-render. Why? Because if you look at it, only this component is subscribed to the value. These guys aren't. How do you subscribe to a value? Use recoil value hook. How do you subscribe to the setter? Use recoil. Use set recoil value hook. And then there is a third hook called use recoil state, which gets both the things basically. But let's not go here just yet. These two, I'm subscribed to the value, I will re-render. I am not subscribed to the value, I am just updating it. Is this guy subscribed to the value? It isn't. Is this guy subscribed to the value? It isn't. If I want to create a fourth component that is subscribed to the current atom's value, that will also re-render. So recoil is ensuring कि सिर्फ ये re-render हो, ये और ये re-render ना हो. Previously, we had what were we doing before this? Before this, we were doing this. We had the state variable defined over here, useState. And whenever the state variable changed, this re-rendered, this re-rendered, this re-rendered. We can fix that a little bit. We will see this very soon when we reach memo. So you can do some of these optimizations in useState also. But recoil does them out of the box. And some optimizations you can't do in useState unless you're using the recoil library or writing the same code that these guys have. So this is highly unoptimal using useState. You can make it slightly more optimal. We will very soon when we reach the memo section. But recoil will, number one, you don't have to use memo, it will do it. Number two, there are some things you can't do without recoil. So do we now understand the use recoil value hook and the use set recoil state hook? Now we do. 91% is great. So let's proceed to an edge case. Abhi tak to I am showing so many benefits of recoil. Some of these benefits you can reap without recoil as well. I've been very harsh on this use state hook, but you can make the use state hook slightly more cleaner and avoid some re-renders by using something called memo. You don't need recoil. You can make use state also slightly more performant by using something called memo. So let's understand what is the memo API in React. If you go back to the slides, I had a slowly building up with a different code base to the same thing. So let's ignore the first section over here. Let's just skip over to introducing memo. Before we introduce memo, you should go through this blog post which tells you React components, when do children re-render. One very important thing that I've hidden until now is, you can read through this as well, it will tell you the same thing. One very important thing I've hidden until now is that whenever a component renders or re-renders, all of its children re-render as well. I repeat, if this guy re-renders, this guy will also re-render, this guy will also re-render, this guy will also re-render. You cannot avoid that unless you are using the memo API. So if there is a state variable over here that I'm not even passing anywhere, मैं इसको यहीं पे update कर रहा हूँ, तब भी this will re-render, this will re-render, this will re-render, this will re-render. I am not even passing counter down, तब भी these are re-rendering. The props aren't changing for these three. Let me write that code and show you. Let me update. App still looks the same. Let me remove recoil completely for now. Let's just stick to non-recoil code. Removing all recoil logic from here. Very simple application which renders the counter component, where let me define the count state variable again in this parent. What am I doing? Defining the count state variable over here. Const count comma set count equal to use state 0. And let me not pass it down kahin bhi. Let me make these components completely empty. Hi. Let me remove, whatever logic I've written over here. Let me remove all the logic I've written in the increase function. Very simple components. The onClick function does nothing. The onClick function does nothing. Current count also just renders high, or let's say 0 or 1. I have just defined a state variable that I am now going to update every 10 seconds, let's say. How can we write the code to update a variable every 5 seconds or 10 seconds? Hopefully we remember this by now. Okay, I can create a use effect hook with empty dependencies where I will write set interval every 3 seconds, let's say, set count to count plus 1. What am I doing? If I had written this much, you would have understood. Okay, Harkiyat is creating an interval which will update the value of count every 3 seconds. I had to wrap it inside a use effect. If you don't understand why that is, you should go back to the class on use effect. What will this do? This will update the counter variable, which I am not sending anywhere. I am not sending the count variable anywhere. But you will notice this will re-render, this will re-render, this will re-render, this will re-render. So if I go back here, notice every 3 seconds, 1, 2, 3, value updated, everything re-rendered. Why did that happen? Why is everything re-rendering when only this is changing? Count तो मैंने कहीं भेजी भी नहीं ना. I have not sent count here, count here, count here. Isn't React smart enough to know कि you are not passing count anywhere? Do not re-render this. And the answer is no, it is not smart. You need to tell it कि यार ये जो component है ना, unless its props change, unless its state variable changes, unless इसके अंदर कोई state variable है जो बदला है, or there is a prop that has been sent down, unless both of them change, do not re-render. You have to tell it explicitly कि यार please don't re-render this, re-render this, re-render this. This तो has to re-render. The parent box has to re-render. क्योंकि इसमें तो count variable जो है वो change हुआ है. But neither one of these should change. All three of these are not even getting that prop that is changing. So they should not re-render. That is not happening right now. How can we fix that? All you have to do is, ये जो आपने function define किया है, current count, you need to wrap it inside a memo, something like, firstly you need to import memo from React. So go to the top and import memo from here. What does memo mean? Memoizing a component and only changing it if the props change. That is where the word memo comes from. And here, rather than defining the component like this, you can define it various ways. One of those ways can be this: current count equal to memo, call the memo function, and इसके अंदर pass the real component. So let me do this. Memoized current count equal to memo of current count. I've defined a new component which is the same component as before, but passed inside the memo function. What will that do? That will give me a component. If I render memoized current count over here, then it will not re-render unless a prop changes or the state changes. इसमें तो कोई prop है ही नहीं. I am not accepting any props over here. It's a constant sort of a function. So this will now not re-render, or this more technically will not re-render, because I have wrapped it inside a memo. The same I can do for the other components. Or if you want to keep it simple, don't want to create a fresh one, you can do something like this. कि जो आपका already बना हुआ है, just convert this into memo. Const current count equal to memo of function. Memo is a function that accepts a function as an input. ये जो आपका function था, you still have that function, you have wrapped it inside a memo. Same thing will happen to the decrease function. Remove the name from here, create a variable equal to memo of this function. Or you can use the other approach where I was creating a new component. Either is fine. Same thing I will do for the increase function. This is the raw increase function, not memoized. This is the other increase function, which now is memoized. Nothing changed. All I did was components को मैंने memo के अंदर pass करा दिया. I have passed the components inside memo. And now, if you look at this, it just stops working. Because I had rendered this over here. So let me replace this with current count refresh. Wait for 3 seconds. Can you notice only the outer component re-rendered? Only this thing re-rendered. This guy, and this guy did not re-render. Because इनमें जो props आए हैं वो तो change ही नहीं हुए. The props that you are sending in did not really change. Do we understand this? Do we understand how memoizing components sort of gives you the same benefits as recoil? अब तो हो गया fix recoil वाला issue. Not everything is re-rendering. Only one thing is re-rendering. ये भी नहीं समझ आया. No problem at all. I think I just need to recap, I would assume. But let me look at Q&A for a minute. Then I will recap memo. Then we will move on to selectors. Let's go over to Q&A. Let's see what's up. Add props, someone said. There is no use of key in setting and getting of state in atom. There's no use of key. It is just to tell recoil कि भाई ये है uniquely identifier. This is how you identify this atom. This is how you identify this atom. You don't use that key ever again. आपके code base में एक ही जगह exist करती है. Recap, understood, recap. All right. React is checking the props and it's only tracking state variables. How is React checking the props when it is only tracking state variables? What is that state variable? It is a prop. What is that prop? It is a state variable only, no? ये जो prop जा रहा है, that is a state variable only. So every state variable, be it created as a state variable over here or passed down as a prop, will trigger a re-render. But more technically for, to understand this better, let me recap with how we started. How did we start? We said we are creating a fresh application. I'm recapping everything. We are creating a fresh application. Jahan pe there is a app component, renders the counter component, which renders 3 different components: increase, decrease, and current count. We said I'm going to define a counter state variable over here. This blue thing is the state variable, and I'm going to change this state variable. I am not going to pass it down as props at all. I will not pass it down as props. I will simply update it over here. Is there any sense of this guy re-rendering then, or this guy re-rendering, or this guy re-rendering? No. They are not even using the state. They are not even getting the state as a prop. So what is the point of all of these re-rendering? There is no point. But React by default, if a component changes, if a component re-renders, will re-render all of its children, which will re-render all of its children. If this guy also had a child component, this will also re-render. Everything down the component tree re-renders. You can wrap the component inside a memo. You can wrap these components inside a memo so that अगर ये count variable यहाँ आ रहा है, if this count variable is getting if this count variable is getting passed below, then this will also re-render. If this count variable is getting passed below, then this will also re-render. But if this count variable is not being passed to this memoized component, so this will not re-render. If this count variable is not being passed to this memoized component, it will not re-render. Even though React says anytime a component re-renders, all its children also re-render. But more technically, all its, but if you wrap a component inside a memo, only if the props or state in that component has changed, only then will it re-render in that child, I would say. क्या कह रहा है ये? React कहता है if this state changes then if this component re-renders, all three children will re-render. But if you wrap the component inside a memo, then only if ये prop नीचे आ रहा था जो change हो रहा है, only then will this re-render. If this prop that was being sent down, if it was being sent down and this re-rendered, then this will re-render, otherwise it won't. What changes did I make to the code? I rendered the counter component, very similar to how it's written over here. The app renders the counter component, app renders the counter component. Counter defines a state variable. Counter defines a state variable. Counter changes that state variable every 3 seconds. This use effect will make sure every 3 seconds the value of count goes up by 1. But this count value is unused. I am not passing it down to any of the children. By default, everything would have re-rendered. But since I have wrapped my components inside a memo, this is my component, I have wrapped it inside a memo. That is why, even if this is re-rendering, since it is not passing count down as a prop, it is not passing count down as a prop. That is why this will not re-render. If I would pass count down as a prop, take count over here and render count function. What am I doing now? अब मैं कह रहा हूं कि यार ये जो पहला the first component is going to take count as an input. Now, even though it is memoized, still it will re-render. अब अगर prop डाल ही दिया है तो उसको render करना ही पड़ेगा ना. How will it change the final value? If you are passing down the prop, then it will re-render. Let's see it. If I now open this website, notice pehla component also re-renders and the outer component also re-renders. So counter re-renders and current count re-renders. Both of these children don't re-render. Increase and decrease don't re-render. Why? Because इनमें तो मैंने count pass ही नहीं करी, right? I did not pass count to them, which is why they don't re-render. This guy does. Memo will do nothing. If you are passing in a prop and that prop only changes, then it will have to re-render. But if count is not passed down as a prop, then this component doesn't need to re-render and it will not re-render because we have memoized it. If we did not use memo, अगर मैं memo यहाँ से हटा दूँ, then we have an unoptimal render, right? We have an unoptimal render over here because ये तो change ही नहीं हो रहा, ये तो hard coded है. Why should the current count component re-render? If I wrap it inside a memo, it will stop re-rendering now. If you go back to the slides, what did the slides say? Memo lets you skip re-rendering a component when its props are unchanged or an internal state variable is unchanged. अगर props ही unchanged हैं, if there are no props to this function, so of course they're always unchanged. Why should this ever re-render? It shouldn't ever re-render, and now it does not. Do we now understand the memo API? Can we move on to selectors next? %90 is great. Let's move on to the last thing for today. Then I'll of course do doubts as always. The last thing for today is going to be, my eyes. Yeah, you should go through this. Okay, so let me, share one more thing. Or we can share. Let's do selectors first, then I'll share, some another way to understand memo, but okay, you understand it, so it's fine. Selectors. One more thing that Recoil provides you is something called selectors. थोड़ी देर पहले someone asked कि हरकिरत, if you have a context API, how is Recoil any better? They said, create your state in the context. Let's say my state looks something like this. User Harkirat, and notification count 2, and message count 3, and let's say messages, which is an array, let's say something like this. A global store for my LinkedIn application. Some of the, you will have a top bar component, which will have, whatever, a notification component, let's say, or message icon component. This is the message icon component. This guy needs to be subscribed to just the notification count. You need to narrow it down. अगर पूरी state change हो रही है, if let's say the username changed from Harkirat to Raman, should this mini component re-render? If I go to LinkedIn, अगर मेरा नाम बदला है, then this should re-render. Sure. Should this re-render? No. This is still 99 plus only, right? But if you are using the context API, and if you have a global store like this, if you have a single context storing everything, what will be the problem? You will not be able to select कि यार इतना अगर change हो तो this will re-render. If message icon will be subscribed to message count, this variable right here. If this is 3, then you will see a 3 icon over here at the top. And similarly, notification count 2 will be sort of subscribed by some notification icon component. You get the idea. This notification icon component will be subscribed to this specific notification count. अगर नाम बदल रहा है या messages बदल रहे हैं, this shouldn't re-render, this shouldn't re-render. Everything shouldn't re-render. But you subscribe to the context. So this global object changes, so this changes. There are ways to get around this also. You can, break down your context. It'll just be very hard to keep doing that. Harder to read. But you can still, make this better and subscribe to some parts of the context, for example. I think, I could be wrong on this, but I think there is a weird way to do this. Recoil makes it very easy. Recoil says, kya theek hai. Keep your global state in a atom. Recoil says, एक global atom बना लो, कोई issue नहीं है, where you are keeping your complete state. And from this atom create various selectors. Selector number 1, name selector. Selector number 2, notification count selector. So on and so forth. Create various selectors, and in your final top bar component, don't subscribe to the atom. Don't subscribe to the atom and उसमें से try to fetch this key. Subscribe directly to the selector. अब अगर ये बदला सिर्फ only if notification count changes, will this component re-render? If the whole atom changes, and let's say the atom changed the name from Raman to Harkirat, since we have a selector, the selector will cut down the state, try to select some parts of it, and then only those parts will get rendered over here. Only when notification count goes from 2 to 3 does this specific Chotu component re-render. It will not re-render if this atom changed. But if I was subscribed to the atom, if I had done use recoil value atom, the full thing, then even if the name changed, this would have re-rendered. अब recoil को थोड़ी पता है कि आप सिर्फ ये यूज कर रहे हो. You need to create a selector, only use that selector attribute, and then only when the notification count changes will this change. So what are selectors? Selector represents a piece of derived state. Given an original state, you can derive another state from it, notification count, which we are subscribing to. You are subscribing just to the notification count, not to the full bada object. You can think of derived state as the output of passing a state to a pure function that derives a new value from the said state. Here you should understand what are pure functions. Some of you might know functions that for a given input always give the same output. What is it saying? You can think of the derived state as the output of passing state to a pure function that derives a new value from that state. What this means is, think of the selector as कि यार इसमें जो भी input आ रहा है, if the input is this and notification count here is 2, output will always be 2. A pure function is a function जिसमें अगर आप एक input दो, वो कुछ change नहीं करता. It doesn't change anything from here. It doesn't get anything from outside. It takes this state and outputs something from that state. अगर आप सेम वेरिएबल फिर से भेजोगे, इट विल स्टिल आउटपुट द सेम थिंग एज लॉन्ग एज द सेम इनपुट इज पास्ड अभी, एंड देन लेट्स से दिस चेंज्ड अ लॉट एंड देन अगेन इट बिकेम द सेम थिंग, the output will still be 2. That is what a pure function is. If you don't understand a pure function, that is fine. Hopefully you understand derived state. Given this variable, I am deriving something else from it, a smaller part of it, and putting it over here. Another example of this might be, what is a good example of this? What if you have the state variable which has, some numbers, let's say, user IDs, let's say, which looks something like this. From this atom, you can derive a selector called even user IDs, which will take the complete state as input and it will output something like, this user IDs 2,4. And then you could have another, whatever selector, which is called odd user IDs. Of course, I can't think of any use case where you would want to do this. Okay, you want them separately. But let's say, whatever, you are assigning even user IDs to VIP people and odd user IDs to normal people. So normal people ko, this state will change very quickly. Normal people will join your application a lot. And normal people will be subscribed to each other's whatever messages, let's say in a chat group. But the important people, उनको आपने अलग से filter out कर दिया कि भाई तुम लोगों की IDs ये हैं, तुम लोग इतना change नहीं करते हो, you don't whatever come to the chat room that often. तो this state will not change as much. This derived state will change a lot. So this component will render a lot. This component will not render a lot. What is this? This is again a derived state. कि यार मैं कहीं और से नहीं आ रहा हूँ. You can never set something directly on me. मुझ पे कभी तुम कुछ update नहीं कर सकते. I am derived from another atom. This is an atom. मैं इससे derive हो गया. Now I am derived from this atom. Oh, I suddenly remembered something. Sorry. I am derived from this atom and you can't set directly something on me. अगर यहाँ पे user IDs में 6 gets added, then sure, I will also update to 246. But that is it. I don't have a wajood of my own. I am derived from another atom. That is what are selectors. Derived state is a powerful concept because it lets you build dynamic data that depends on other data. For example, let's say we change our application a bit. We have app component, which renders the buttons, let's say the left button, right button, or increase button, decrease button, renders the counter, and renders something called is even, renders another component called is even. अब ये component will render true or false if the current count is even. अगर even है तो यहाँ true आएगा, odd है तो यहाँ false आएगा. You can directly subscribe to this, or you can subscribe to a selector. That way, अगर ये number 2 से 4 हुआ, 4 से 6 हुआ, 6 से 8 हुआ, if this number is only increasing by 2, then this selector will never change. This will still be true. If this number goes from 2 to 4 or 4 to 6, is even selector, which is, converting this state into a true or a false, deriving a true or a false from this counter atom, this will not change. And hence this component will not re-render. अगर आप 2 से increment कर रहे हो, if you are incrementing by 2, अगर मैं atom से subscribed होता, if I was subscribed to the atom, then I would re-render a lot. But if I am subscribed to the selector, जब 2 change होगा तब मैं re-render करूँगा. If this doesn't change much, I will also not re-render. Let's see this in action. I know this is a little complicated to look at. So let's try to code this up. Let me remove everything and start from scratch. Completely empty application. Only thing is the counter atom is already defined. And let me also first define a counter selector. Export const. I shouldn't do it here. I should do it in a separate folder called selectors. But for now, I am just doing it over here. I have an atom. I have this thing right here. I am creating a selector. यार इससे मैं derive करूंगा whether or not the current count is even. How do you create a selector? Like this. This is where I thought, this key might be used later on, when you're getting the counter. But someone asked, is this key used somewhere? I think I might know a place where. This is how you create the selector. Atom बना हुआ यहाँ. Let me create a derived state. Let me create a selector from it. Export const even selector equal to, very similar to atom. Selector is a function. It takes two things. Number one, the key, a name for it to uniquely identify it. Let's say is even selector. And since it is a derived state, it is a state जो किसी और चीज पे डिपेंड करती है. I am not defaulting the value. I can never give the value. I depend on something else, bhai. I depend on something else. Give me the function that lets me derive the state. What is the other input that goes over here? The other input is a get key, which is a function. It is not a value. It is a key called get, which is a function. This function gets another key called get as an input. This might be a little confusing. I'll take you through it again. This function itself, जब भी ये function call होगा, eventually this function will be called by recoil to understand has the state changed ever. तो whenever this function gets called, इसके अंदर एक get function आएगा जहां से you can get any atom that you want. You can derive state from any atom. हमें चाहिए even selector depends on the counter atom. Even selector depends on the counter atom. So over here, I have to const count, or whatever, current count, let's say, equal to get counter atom. Here I depend on the counter atom. Even selector depends on the counter atom. And I want to return current count modulo 2 equal to 0. Or, if you want to get const is even equal to current count modulo 2 equal to 0. Hopefully you guys understand this math. This says that when you divide the current count, let's say it's 1. When you divide it by 2, what is the remainder? If the remainder is 0, if you divide this number by 2, if the remainder is 0, that means it is an even number. 2, 4, 6, 8 are all even numbers. How do you know if a number is even in mathematics? You say, क्या remainder क्या आता है जब मैं 2 से divide करता हूँ? If the remainder is 0, then it is even. If the remainder is 1, then it is odd. So what condition did I put? कि यार const is even equal to current count modulo 2 equal to 0. अगर जो current count है वो 0 है, then return true, else return false. थोड़ा difficult था ये. I know, slightly hard to digest. Let me recap. I have a counter atom which is holding my global state. My global state is just a number, no complex object right now. I have derived a selector from it called even selector. This is the name for the selector. And this is the logic of how can you derive some state from another atom. I can actually depend on multiple atoms also. कि अगर ये change हुआ या ये change हुआ, then some update will happen on me. So even selector says कि यार मैं depend करता हूँ counter atom पे. Give me the current state of the counter atom. I do some mathematics on it to figure out is this number true or false, and then I return that. Why is this useful? Because now when I am creating my components, अब जब मैं अपने components बनाऊंगा, for example, let me create a top level app component. Let me export it from app.jsx. Here, let me return a div which has it renders a count component. Okay, what's the diagram over here? Let's just follow the same diagram. Buttons, counter, and is even. So it renders three things: buttons, counter, and is even component. Buttons component is simple. It will return two buttons. Button number 1 that says increase. Button number 2 that says decrease. When I click on the increase button, what do I want? I want to update the value by 1. So I can either use this syntax, or if this feels complicated, let me do this. जब ये button click होगा, call the increase function. When this button is clicked, call the decrease function. In the increase function, what do I say? Set count to be, let's say, count plus 2. Let's increase it by 2 for now. Let's not increase it by 1. Decrease में, let me say count minus 1. ठीक है? My count function is a little complicated or different. Increasing the value by 2, decreasing the value by 1. Const set count equal to, क्या आएगा यहाँ पे? Use set recoil state. This we did a while back. Buttons only needs the setter. It does not need the current value. This is how you get the setter for the counter atom. I want to set the counter atom, update the counter atom. Let me import this from the right file. And this function hopefully does what it's supposed to do. Has two buttons. Increase पे click किया, set count c plus 2. Decrease पे click किया, set count c minus 1. That is the buttons component. Counter and is even, दो component बचे. What is the counter component supposed to do? Render the counter. What will it subscribe to? It will subscribe to the atom, क्योंकि इसको तो real value चाहिए. तो the counter component will say const count equal to use recoil value counter atom. It is subscribing to the actual atom कि भाई तू change होगा तो I will re-render. And let's say it just renders it over here. And the third component is the is even component. What is this guy subscribing to? This guy is not subscribing to the atom. It is subscribing to a derived state, the selector. This is what we are learning in this section. I am subscribed to some part of counter. I don't want to know the actual value. I just want to know even है कि odd है. So it subscribes to the selector. Const whatever even equal to use recoil value. Hook is still the same. I don't have to do something like use recoil selector value or something like that. Use recoil value. But what do I want to subscribe to? Do I want to subscribe to the counter atom? No. What is even subscribed to? The selector. So यहाँ पे I will put even selector. Import it from the right file. Return div which will conditionally render. If even is true, then it will render even, else it will render odd. Something like this. So app component has buttons, counter, and even is even. The same thing that you see in the diagram. Counter is subscribed to the value over here. Counter atom. Is even is subscribed to the value of the selector, a derived state. Let's see what does it look like in action. Of course it crashes. It crashes because I forgot to wrap my application inside a recoil root. If you are using recoil, if any of these functions, any of these components are going to use recoil value or use recoil, whatever, the other one, use set recoil state, then they have to be wrapped inside the recoil root. Now let's see it. Looks interesting. Let me open it in Google Chrome and open the React DevTools. When I click on increase, what re-renders? Only this component re-renders. Only the counter component re-renders. Since the state changed, this component was subscribed to the state. This component re-rendered. हरकीरत ये भी तो derived था, dependent था state पे. This did not subscribe to this. This subscribed to a derived state. कि यार तू change होगा तो मैं render करूँगा. If you change, I will re-render. That is why when you increase, only this guy is re-rendering. When you decrease, तब वो odd हो जाएगा. It will go from 20 to 19. It will go from even to odd. Then both of them are re-rendering. So as I decrease, you can see both of them are re-rendering because this also changed and the derived state also changed. But if I am increasing, even though the global state changed, since the derived state did not change, the isEven component does not re-render. So do we understand why you might want to use atoms and selectors and have a global state, break that down into smaller selector state and use them in your application? Let's do a quick poll. I most probably will have to recap. I can already guess the poll, but let's see. Yep. That too is very, very bad. I also felt it's a little tiring. Let's take a break, 74%. Let's take a small 2-minute breather. Then I will recap for the next 2 minutes. Let me answer some Q&A. I'm sure you guys just need a recap. I'm happy to do that. Selector is a partial dummy image of atom state only having read properties. That is true. That is a great way to put it. Selector is a partial dummy image of an atom having only read properties. Why only increase is even don't even re-render? Why increase? Because when I'm increasing, this value is going from 26 to 28. It is still an even number. This isEven selector did not change. It is not re-rendering because this selector is not changing. Even though when I'm increasing it by 2, it is always even as I increase it. This thing is changing. This guy is re-rendering. This thing isn't changing. So this guy isn't re-rendering. If I decrease, then this will change and this will change. And hence both of them will re-render. So when I decrease, I go from even to odd, odd to even. Then both re-render. When I increase, just one of them re-renders. Selector, what is the use of pure function? There is no use of a pure function. Oh, in the real world, pure functions are used to, you can determine कि given an input, always the output will be the same. If you can assume that, you can write code, a certain way. तुम कुछ चीजें assume कर सकते हो. If you know a function is a pure function, that is it. Here it's not. Here it is just that the function that we are passing is a pure function. जो selector में हमने function लिखा है, it takes whatever, the state as an input. You can get state from here, do some math on it and return it. This is a pure function because अगर state 0 है, if it changes to 2 and comes back to 0, as long as the input is 0, output will always be true. So it is a pure function. We are not using any properties of this. It is just technically a pure function. What is the use of key inside automand command? Automand command? Oh, atom and selector. Sorry. What? It just lets recoil know कि अच्छा ये वो वाला atom है, ये वो वाला atom है. If you try to create another atom with the same key, it will start to, complain. I've also wondered the same thing initially. I've never deep dived into it. When I was writing a code, I used to, copy paste it fast. And then, this is whatever random atom. And I would change the default value. Forgot to change the key. And then recoil would start to complain that you can't have two atoms with the same key. So recoil uses it. ये key वो कहीं store करता होगा ना कि this atom, the counter atom points to this guy. The counter 2 atom points to this guy. the is even selector points to this guy. So it is just a name that you give to recoil, so it can identify कि ये वाला है, ये वाला है. Recoil or any other libraries use other npm packages. How much code goes to the client? If you say all, then the whole node modules will be sent, but only 100 MB of size. Yeah, that is not necessary. There is this concept called tree shaking, which basically means कि if you are only selecting atoms and selector, तो आपके पास सिर्फ atom और selector का code आएगा. That depends on some libraries. You will get just that code. You are technically right. Are we sending the full node modules? Most of the times, yes. Unless the library implements, some optimizations like tree shaking, which will make sure कि अच्छा आप इतना ही select कर रहे हो तो इतना ही आएगा. तभी when a library has tree shaking, you should always do this and not do this. Okay, import star as recoil from recoil, and यहाँ पे start to use recoil dot atom. अब तो उसको लगेगा आपको पूरी library चाहिए. It will think like you need the whole library. If you only need atoms and selectors, only select atoms and selectors, only that code will get added to the bundle. What happens if we set count as a prop and increase or decreases child? They are reaped inside memo and change the value of count. Will it re-render the increase or decrease child now? If I pass set count to increase, when I call set count, does set count change? No, count changes. Set count never changes. If set count, the function is not changing, then why would it re-render? The count is the thing that is changing. If you pass set count to a memoized function and you call set count, calling it is not the same as changing it. So since you have not changed it, it will not re-render. घोड़े खुल गए, इतने में खुल गए. Can we use ref somehow? Use ref to build some of these optimizations? Maybe. It feels like ना कि हाँ use ref भी तो वही है. It is storing some value without re-rendering. So maybe use ref can be used under the hood to prevent some of this and not use recoil. I think the answer is yes. I don't think we have a deep dive video from last code. We have like very similar, but whatever video I have, I'll post. We have like recoil from all two codes. All right, time to recap selectors. Atoms we understood. And I said कि selectors let you, given a big state, derive some smaller states from it. They let you derive another state from the original big state. For example, we have an atom called counter or whatever, count atom, where we store, a count that's 5. I said, yeah, I want to create a component called is even, which will render either even or odd based on ये number क्या है, even है कि odd है. Now this is even component could directly subscribe to the atom. इसके अंदर मैं सीधा ये भी लिख सकता हूँ कि const even equal to use recoil value count or count atom. I can directly write this over here. But what is the problem with writing this? The problem with writing this is const even equal to use recoil value atom. I am subscribed to this guy. If this guy changes, if this goes from 5 to 7, I will have to re-render. But did I need to re-render? DOM badla kya? Nahi. It was odd before. It is odd right now. If I go from 5 to 7 or 7 to 9 or 9 to 11, 11 to 13, doesn't matter. This is still odd. If I go from 13 to 14, then this should re-render because it needs to go from odd to even. But if I'm subscribed to the whole state, then doesn't matter if it's going from 14 to 16, I will still re-render and not change the final thing on the DOM. To prevent this extra re-rendering, what I can do is create a derived state. Create a derived state which will either be true or false based on क्या ये 16, is this number even or odd. Now I will subscribe to this derived state. I will say use recoil value selector, जो भी है even selector है या even selector. I am only subscribed to this guy. This guy is derived from this guy. अगर एटम बदला 16 से 18 गया, इफ इट गोज फ्रॉम 16 to 18, द चेंज कम्स हियर, इट रिकैलकुलेट्स कि अच्छा ट्रू ही तो रहा. इट डज नॉट प्रोपोगेट द चेंज हियर, इट डज नॉट फोर्स दिस टू री रेंडर when the value is still true. If this goes from 18 to 20, value is still true, this guy does not re-render. Goes from 20 to 24, value is still true, does not re-render. If it goes from 24 to 25 is when this guy re-renders, or changes from true to false, and hence the component re-renders. So the component is not subscribed to the atom, it is subscribed to a subset of the atom. It is subscribed to a derived state from the atom. Subset is the wrong word. A derived state from the atom. So that doesn't matter अगर ये बदला. अगर ये बदला तो मैं re-render करूँगा. If this changes, then I will re-render. In the future, we will have multiple atoms, and a selector can be subscribed to multiple atoms. This might be your list of users on your website, an array, whatever. Name Harkirat is premium true, something like this. This is an array of elements, and this might be another state variable called let's say show premium users, which can be true or false. So I can create a derived state from this कि what are the current list of users I want to show. मैं थोड़ा complicate कर दिया, but basically websites में कई बार ऐसा होता है, in an admin dashboard you can see a list of users, and there is a toggle over here that says only premium or premium. If you check mark this toggle, तो आपको सिर्फ premium users दिखेंगे. तो this might be one atom, this might be another atom, और इन दोनों से आप एक selector बना दोगे, and that selector will give you the state to render here. थोड़ा complicated हो गया ये, कुछ को समझ आया, कुछ को नहीं, उसको छोड़ो. Let's look at the simpler example. Counter atom is defined like this. Selector का code is a little hard to read. Selector, whenever you write, it doesn't have a default value. It is derived from another thing, a bunch of other things. तो selector में आप value नहीं देते हो, you give a getter. कि यार this is how you can get the state. This is how you can get this specific selector. What do we say? कि यार get is a function, and ये function जब भी call होगा, whoever calls this function, they will send another function in here called get. ये थोड़ा hard to understand. When you are defining the selector, जब आप selector को define कर रहे हो, simple example कहाँ गया ये रहा, leave it. When you are defining the selector, you can tell कि I depend on the counter atom. When you call get of counter atom, तो recoil understands कि this selector depends on this atom. Whenever this changes, I might have to recalculate the state over here. अगर ये 2 से 4 चला गया, if it goes from 2 to 4, I might have to recalculate the state. But if you look at the final calculation, you will see that after I get the current state of the atom, I am simply checking कि is current count modulo to 0. If this code feels jarring, I can also write this. If current count modulo 2 equal to 0, return true, else return false. Something like this I can write. If this condition is met, return true, else false. What this is doing is creating a derived state from the atom. ये रहा atom. whose default value is 2, and I am deriving a selector from it. Which is either true or false. This selector is what my component is subscribed to. मेरा जो is even component है वो इस पे डिपेंड करता है, इस पे नहीं. It depends on this guy. So if this goes from 0 to 2, This guy does not change. This guy does not re-render. Goes from 2 to 4. This guy does not change. This guy does not re-render. Goes from 4 to 5. This guy does change. This guy re-renders. So we are minimizing the re-renders of this function because it doesn't depend on this y. It depends on this, a derived state. That is why, given this atom and selector, what is our final architecture? Our final architecture looks like this. App, the top level component, renders 3 child components: buttons, counter, and easy1. This guy is not subscribed to anything. This guy simply sets value on the counter atom. It just updates the counter atom. This guy subscribed to this atom. This guy subscribed to this selector. What that does is कि जब भी ये value change होती है, the counter component re-renders as it should. Counter depends on counter atom. This guy depends on this guy. If this goes from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this guy should re-render. But is even does not depend on counter. It depends on the derived state. तो अगर ये change हुई, this goes from true to false, then this guy would re-render. If you look at our buttons component, यहाँ पे I am increasing the value by 2, decreasing the value by 1. So that अगर मैं, if I look at the final application, since I'm increasing it by 2, atom changes, selector doesn't change. This re-renders, this does not re-render because this has not changed. अब अगर मैं इसको change कर दूं, if I stop using selectors, if even in the is even component, I use just the atom, let's say counter atom. And here I write if counter atom mod 2 is 0, then render even else odd. If I change my logic in the is even component, कि भाई तू भी यहाँ depend कर, screw the selector. If I make this guy also subscribe to the counter atom directly, what will happen? When I increase, both of them re-render. Does this guy need to re-render? It is not changing only, it is still odd. It doesn't need to re-render, still it is re-rendering. But if I subscribe to the right atom, sorry, the right selector, the even selector, then only this guy re-renders, this guy does not re-render. Do we now understand selectors and why you should use them? All of this code is present in the slides as well. So you can, this diagram is coded right below. You can, go over there and see. 90% is pretty good. 87%, pretty decent. Cool, that's it guys. That's all for today. I'm going to take doubts now, but that's all I had officially for today's class. Hopefully you understood these 2 things that we will dive into our, first let's build a project. Maybe I can tell atom family, selector family, but you will not need atom family for a long time. Then suddenly you will be like, how do I create atoms inside a for loop? And then you will learn about atom family. We can do it that way. Or I can explain it theoretically and then eventually when we build the project, it will come back. Either way is fine. Whatever project we build first, I'll try to build it in a way or, have the requirements in a way that you need an atom family. So you learn that as well. So this is what we have learned. 2 things we should learn are atom families and selector families. Cool. With that, officially class is done. I am going to look at chat now. So any questions that you have, let's face it together. What? Any questions that you guys have, please post. Class is officially ended. If you understood everything, feel free to drop off as well. All right, a lot of questions. Let me stop. Start from the top. All right, let's start on the bottom only. When will DevOps start? Let's see. We'll do a poll this week. Are you guys okay with me starting to post? Because we've built websites now. We should understand VMs, start deploying them. When we build projects, there should be a testing platform where you can come and give your backend URLs and we test. So we should understand deploying to a VM. We'll do a poll if everyone's okay with me making some recorded videos. We'll start off DevOps recorded and then we'll move on because web dev will probably continue for another month or 2 at the very least. Great. We should build a project using React and Express. So, we will. recorded video on this. This one also. Yesterday also someone said, I think we've 90% is good, right? If 90% understands, that means, just go through the video again, you'll understand. Thoda. Less than that, vibe समझ आती है if people understand. I think 90% should be good. Just go through the video again. I don't think we need an offline video for this one. But still, if it is needed, let me know. Can we get a separate atom? Then why is the need for selector? You can create a separate atom, but will you have two variables then? A different count variable and a different, whatever is even variable. How will you maintain both of them? When you are updating this, will you do set count 4 and then set even true? This is a derived state. Why are you duplicating state? That's a very bad idea. What if you forget in some place, you change this to 5, but you forget to have is even. So, you can have two atoms, but don't have two atoms. You have to set both the atoms. Whenever an update has happened, it will start to happen on both the places. Update should happen only on one place, and this should get derived from it. That way, you never have syncing issues. कि इसको आपने 5 कर दिया, and this you forgot to set as is even true. Does even selector return true if is even component is previous value was also true? Does is even selector return true to is even component is previous value was true? I don't understand this. I'm assuming you mean कि I don't know. Do you mean कि पहले यहाँ true था? Does true come again here? No, this doesn't re-render. If it doesn't re-render, this line of code does not run again. That means if it was true, it is not re-returning true and we are not recalculating anything. There is no re-render that is happening, and that means, this component sort of stays there. Please make project using React and Express. Okay, answered that. I will do that. Few more questions. Notion docs. So many Notion docs. Someone had hot module reloading. I saw that at the beginning of the class also. Serious issue, help. Let's see. Notion doc. A lot of people are asking about DevOps. So let's just do a poll, and if more than 50% are okay with recorded videos, I'll post at least the VM video. You can start to at least deploy your application somewhere. Very good. I like it. Fonts are a little off. Everything else looks decent. Yeah, it's not pixel perfect. As you can see, why is this in the corner? Maybe because I'm on a longer screen. Oh no, what the fuck? Yeah, you can see the problem, right? The top bar is moving. So, if you are showing me UI, which there's no reason to, but if you are showing it, should be pixel perfect. No, what is the point of me reviewing if such a basic thing is missed? You get the idea, right? Don't feel bad, but 10 seconds wasted. It's because if anyone is looking at it like a recruiter, they will be like, no, thank you. Why is this, all you've done is build a UI. It should be pixel perfection there, no? Not too difficult. You can do it. I believe in you. Send it to me again once you fix it. Full stack application, and there is a local host link. Thank you. Working on my machine also, sir. God, these will turn into roasting sessions. Sir, this is my full stack to do application with a local host link. Love it. It is working on my machine also. Fucking amazing. Let me stop this. And let me retry your website, sir. Great website, I must say, though. Your website is down. You check your server. Maybe, your server is down or something. But looked great a while back. And Twitter post, यहाँ पे भी local host होगा तो मजा आ जाएगा. नहीं है. Oi. But yeah, this was great, man. Love it. And kudos to you for getting that domain. It was hard to find. I hope people understand sarcasm. Please refresh after sarcasm. But yeah, I'm using Cohort 2. I have given us some medium clone project. So I've made okay, looks good. Again, I'll say the same things. If minutely something is putting off here, yeah, the UI isn't great. I mean, it's decent, okay. I mean, you should showcase projects, but if they're really good, otherwise, what's the point? I take it, you've made a project. Great. But make it so good. Kirta is also like, that looks good. Do you want to get hired? Something like that. And your render is down most probably. This also seen so commonly now. Okay. I visit a website, it's down. I message them, the backend is down. They're like, oh, sorry, render. I have to go to render and, restart my whatever, this thing. So yeah, just get a VM. It's 400 rupees a month. Some functions taking longer to time to sign in, takes a long time at first. Oh, that did happen for me. Okay. Probably you have the cold start problem and you should, fix that by, there are a few ways to do it. I tweeted about it. That's one more way. I'll wait. Want a separate DB URL for 3 branch. Can't figure out until now. Oh, till now I've manually changed the DB URL, dev branch, prod branch. Oh, firstly, why do you need database in your CI/CD pipeline? You only need database in your CI/CD pipeline if you're doing migrations in your CI/CD pipeline, which you shouldn't for some reason, because if you have a bad DBO, it'll automatically deploy to dev prod and you're screwed. A lot of times migrations are done manually by devs. If you want your CI/CD pipeline, have your database URLs in your GitHub secrets. Have 3 different pipelines for dev branch, prod branch, master branch, and secret as the database URL and migrate the database over there, and so on and so forth. Here is a reference implementation. Go to github.com/code100x/dailycode.github. Workflows. We have a CD, prod, and CD. This deploys to production, this deploys to dev. So if you go to cd.yaml, you will see what database I'm using, what secret am I using, staging_database. If you go to cd_prod, what database am I using? Prod_database. So have your databases in the secrets and pick the right database URL in the right row. Okay, there we go. Yeah, this is decent. This was a blog post, right? Yeah. Yeah, pretty good. If you have the workflows, but hopefully you get the idea. What's the fix there. Please make video on how to use this thing and this thing. Yeah, we have a video from last cohort. These will become, yeah, sure, happy to do it. I think I go to the same blog post in the video as well. They're not needed in React 19 anymore, but I'll still cover, a bunch of these hooks. I'm unsure if it was a live video or an offline video. If it's an offline video from last code, I'll just post it, else I'll re-record. Using upload today's recording before tomorrow afternoon, sure. Will most probably happen. I'm home, so should be fine. Use recoil state versus use set recoil state. This gets the actual value, this gets the updater. Use recoil value, sorry. Yeah, there are 3 things. Let me quickly take you through them. This will get just the value. Use set recoil state will get just the updater. So, set count. This will get the value. And then there is a third one. Use recoil state. This will get both the value and the updater. This will get just the value. This will get just the updater. So you can either do these 2 lines of code if you ever need both the value and the updater, or you can do it in a single line of code over here. Can we do the same task done by by atom by defining different? No, so you can't, right? I explained the while back, same thing. Refresh. You can't create another atom because you have duplicated state then. One for number, one for easy one. Whenever you're updating the number, you will have to update the state also. Otherwise, they will go out of sync. So have a single source of truth, derive other states from it. Implement the best practice for design, basically solid design principles. How can I understand? Okay. Please tell me the assignment project should build recap, summarize the concept till date. Medium is the best one. Cohort 2 mein banaya. Very decent, simple project. Very basic, simple starter, like e-commerce, but simpler e-commerce is a to-do application, or a Medium clone that someone else made over here. That means React now, or whatever, the MERN stack now. What is this? Oh, like these principles. How did you learn them? Oh, like on the go, whenever you need a specific, whatever design pattern, I have learned them that way, if that was your question. How can I understand the way you should do this for system design interviews. A lot of people do it. I've never gone through a book. There's a book that I was reading the other day. It covers some system design book, like it has 2 parts. Some of you might know already. It covered, a lot of things that you will anyways learn on the job. For example, it was teaching about CDNs. You will anyways learn about CDNs if you're ever doing, image uploads, video uploads. And same thing is just a lot of things you learn on the job can be learned via books, but it's better to learn them on the job. Also doesn't hurt if you're reading a book. So pick some system design book. They cover like all of these concepts. I don't have access. Weather tracking app, UI is completely designed by me. Okay, let's see. Graphic design, I'm currently third year student. I started learning MERN. Could you advise how to learn React effectively? Yeah, so one thing I recommended to someone else is pretty good. Someone in Super 30 also, I'm forcing to sort of remain in UI and not touch backend, even though everyone's fascinated by backend. Everyone's building a very complex project. I told her कि नहीं आप React करो, because she's decent at design and I want her to stick to that niche and do really well. Right? So I would say the same thing. If you're already good at this, create a, or I'm happy to ping 100x devs. I'll share the same assignment with you that girl is doing in Super 30. It's basically taking a Figma file and creating components from it and creating a storybook for it. So that whoever is the final UI engineer can pick up your components. This is what a UI engineer should do. Design a Figma doc, design all the components, put them in storybook. Razorpay storybook. Whatever website you are given to build, if you as the UI engineer can build something like this, where all the components I can see, for example, whatever, this is all the inputs that our website has. This is what the OTP input looks like. This is what how you render the component, and this is how it finally looks. Or whatever. This is what the header looks like. This is what a header with all the variants are rendered in a single place. Then I know what component to pick and finally put in the application. So do this, like learn to do this. This is a great skill a design plus developer should have. And if you want the assignment, just ping 100x's Twitter. Akash will connect you to me and I'll send you the assignment as well. Very good. Very good. This one. I'm asking after checking up with TAs online GPT. I use WSL. Do you have a fix for the solution of HMR? Like it isn't reflecting the changes on the browser upon changes. I always need to manually include this in the weed.config.js in the define config function, but it should be default, right? When I create a project, below is the reference. You have to add use polling to true, or you have to add HMR to true. Let's see. What does my weed config look like? weed.config.js define config this thing. You're saying you have to explicitly add HMR true, but for me, I don't have to do that. And if I do HMR false, let's see if that disables HMR for me. app.jsx, remove all of this. And let me change this from, whatever, increase to the, oh, it's still happening. Weed config disable HMR. Define config server HMR false. That's what you did as well. Yeah. So this one, what is that? There you go. Maybe was it this for you or was it this? Most probably was this only, I would assume. Now let's see. HMR false. Refresh. Increase, decrease, and if I make this something else, yeah, hot module it stopped for me now. If I make a change over here, it doesn't update automatically. I have to refresh the page. Now the question is, why does your default config had that? So can I, or can you on your machine do this const config equal to this thing, and then export default config and log the config. Refresh. Server HMR false and a bunch of things. Can you log your default config and see, okay, is this overridden over there to false? For some reason, maybe you're using a bad version of Vite. You installed it using a different, whatever way. Maybe this is some OS specific issue. You said you're using WSL. So can you log this config variable and go from there? Okay, what exactly does it log? Does it log HMR false by default, which is why you have to update it to true? Try that and update the Notion doc. I'll refresh in like 2 minutes when I answer all the other questions. Answer this one. This is debounce algorithm I wrote in Paytm code 2 yesterday, but it's not working as expected. Can you check? What the fuck? That looks... Oh. Bhai sahab, how complicated have you made this? Use effect debounce equal to a function which takes another function as an input and delay as an input and defines a timeout ID and returns a function, passes the same arguments over here, calls clear timeout on the on the timeout and changes this to this. Const debounce equal to this, and where are you using this function? Yeah, there you go. That's the problem right there. When this component re-renders a bunch of times, this function will be redefined, this timeout ID will change, and then, whatever, clear timeout will not work as expected. Log timeout ID over here, or put this inside a use callback. Yeah, put this inside a use callback, then it will be fixed. Or define this outside. You have defined this function doesn't need to be inside the component, right? Yeah, it's not using anything from inside the component. Define this function outside the component, you should be fine. What is happening is as this component re-renders, this variable gets reinitialized, which reinitializes this, and your timeout ID becomes null again or undefined again. So this function should be defined outside the component, or this function, just put this inside a use callback and you should be fine. All right. Oh yeah, is it necessary to? Exactly. It is necessary to wrap it inside a use callback because the top of the function is a return function. Because on top it is a function and it will return a function in some, I don't know what this statement means, but yes, you either have to wrap this inside a use callback or put this inside the component so that every re-render doesn't, update it. In use context, what I do is I don't pass the count and set count as props and fetch the value using use context if every component I'm using will cause re-render. If I don't pass, even if you don't pass it as a prop, every component in the chain will re-render. Does recoil use fix memo to fix re-rendering? No, it does. I mean, it probably uses memo also. I don't know. Probably not. It probably does not use memo. Probably does not use memo. Someone else said refs. If I had to guess, I think they use a lot of refs, but I could be wrong again. Yeah, they have some algorithm that uses a tree to figure out what components have re-rendered. Does it use memo? Probably not. Does it use ref? Probably, but we'll have to go through the video, go through the code base to understand. Can you release a TypeScript video on YouTube? We have one already. Search for TypeScript Harkiyat, you'll find one. It's sort of it's like half video was uploaded, half wasn't, but there is a video. JS is on the left, TS is on the right. There's an arrow in the thumbnail. All right, we'll come back to this one. Close. Oh, you created something. UI is decent. What is this, like Kanban or something? Looks like it. Yeah, pretty decent. How do I start? Get started does nothing. Oh, it does. Oh, I have to log in again. Okay. Always provide dummy usernames and passwords, so it's easy to. Yeah, let's just go through your code. Yeah, same thing. Why does everyone use render for backends? It's $5 a month. I don't know. I don't want to speak out of privilege here. But like $5 a month for, what if there is one interviewer that's looking at your page and, or use Firebase, which this guy is also. Do you have your configs right? Or can I read through some of your databases? Is your database protected? Why are you not using Firebase auth? Because if you were, you probably don't need to hit a backend in the middle. Sign up. Hope it doesn't send an email. Let's see. Yeah, UI is pretty bad. This isn't a button. When I hover over it, it's still an arrow, not converting into a pointer. This one is fine. Join a team, create a team. The UI is messed up. Yeah, I get functionality is good. UI is a little messed up. But yeah, as you saw, I saw the UI. I was like, maza nahi aa raha, band kar diya, right? Same might happen with the recruiter. So, make sure the UI is clean. Answer this one. Answer this one. Answer this one. Answer this one. This one's left. Refresh. Let's see if you have changed anything. Did you log the config? Are you there on the call? Refresh again. And I don't have access to this one. Still don't have access to this one. I don't have access to this one. Hi sir, whatever that is. All right, I'll wait for another minute on this one. I'll answer chat. Until then, anything else? I'm in US H1B. सारी जॉब्स आउटसोर्स हो रही हैं. इंडिया वापस जाना चाहिए. गोल वॉज टू लिव परमानेंटली हियर बट जॉब इज टू अनसर्टन. गोलैंग आता है मच. चर्चा करो इस पे यार एक बार. अर्जुन भाई एक बार जरा थोड़ा 100x ट्विटर पे हाई भेज दो प्लीज़. आई वुड लव टू टॉक टू यू एंड अंडरस्टैंड कि कितनी आउटसोर्सिंग हो रही है, कहाँ हो रही है, एंड यू नो ऑल्सो हेल्प यू आउट विद योर सिचुएशन. So do you mind pinging 100x devs Twitter? So go to twitter.com, 100x devs, this one right here. Click on message and just message over here. Just message over here, and then we can go from there and talk. More than happy to talk. Is website clone not enough to get hired as a front-end dev? No. I mean, yeah, but like how well have you cloned it is the question. React is done. No Tailwind. We have to do a bunch of other hooks. We have to do some advanced concepts. We have to do. Someone asked a use transition hook the other day. That we have to do. We have to build projects. So theoretical until this point. So 2 more weeks at least. I want a quick review of this. Oh, I think I saw this one. Oh, I did not. Yeah, UI is pretty bonged. Yeah, UI is bonged. I would just not watch it. So yeah, review is fix the UI and then send it again. What is the set inside the selector? Is there a set inside the selector? Set selector recoil. There is a set. Let's see what it does. Function used to set the value of the upstream recoil state. The first parameter is the recoil state, and the second parameter is the new value. The new value may be an updater function. Let's see. That's a good question. I also need to see this in action. Set, get, and reset. All right. There we go. This is a selector which gets the state like this. It basically converts whatever Fahrenheit into Celsius. Again, is a derived state. And what is set doing over here? Set a new value. It is updating this atom. New value is default value. New value else. New value is instance of default value. What is this? No. I'm saying new value instance of default value, then new value, else new value to convert it in the other direction. Yes. Oh, let's try this out. This is like a great example that will teach a lot. So if I go to my counter.js and replace everything with this atom temp Fahrenheit, basically the temperature in Fahrenheit. Selector which converts the temperature in Fahrenheit into temperature in Celsius. This is the algorithm that you use. Now, updater, it takes to a new value. How does it know if it's instance of default value? This part I want to understand basically. Everything else was pretty simple. Okay, this setter will let you update the upstream atom. You can update it directly over here, or you can, what? Let's see. You can call use set recoil state then. Let's see. Temp C, temp. Ooh, got it. Very nice. Yeah, I don't think you will ever use this. It's very hard to read, but it's very good. Let me copy the whole thing, right? So add.jsx, let me remove everything. Let me add the atom, the selector, and a component that lets you, whatever, increase, decrease the thing. Let me re-add the app component over here, which simply renders the temp Celsius component. Temperature in Celsius. Let me export default app, move it to the end. What do we have? We have an app component which renders the temp Celsius component, which uses the temp Fahrenheit atom and the temp Celsius selector. It has getters on it and setters on it, both the atom and the selector. Harkirat, you to said selector ko you cannot update. Selector is a derived state. Yes, but you can update the derived value. इसके ऊपर वाली जो value है आप, sorry, update the original state जहाँ से define हो रही है. This setter function will let you set whatever atom that you are using or deriving from to some new value. The question is ये कितनी बढ़िया चीज़ है यहाँ पे उन्होंने की है. Okay, which I'll come to very soon. So let me go over here. Let me go to localhost 5173. Of course, it doesn't work because I have not wrapped the app inside a recoil root and something like this. Add 10 to Celsius. क्या करेगा? इसको 10 से बढ़ा देगा. And of course, we'll do something here. That happened. Increase by 10, and this is the temperature in Fahrenheit. This function is working. Add 10 to Fahrenheit. मैं इसको अपडेट कर रहा हूं. जो अंडर द हुड इसको भी अपडेट कर देगा, जहां से वो चेंज यहां पे आएगा. आई एम टेक्निकली अपडेटिंग द सेलेक्टर, बट यू कांट एवर अपडेट अ सेलेक्टर. यू कैन अपडेट उस पेरेंट को जहां से ये वैल्यू आ रही है. सो व्हेन आई क्लिक ऑन दिस, नोटिस दिस वेंट अप बाय 10. ये 186 से 196 से 206. This is updating by 10. This guy is updating by a big value or whatever, you know, whatever the ulta calculation is. How that is happening is, notice this. It says, here I am not simply doing updating it to be the new value. Even though if you do this, it will still work. This is also enough for now. If I do this, notice ye, arey nahi, this is not enough. Temp Celsius, wait, why does it have, add 10 to Celsius. Add 10 to, sorry, Fahrenheit, my bad. This is good enough. Is it though? 32, 42, 52, yeah. Add 10 to Fahrenheit, which updates the atom, is working as expected. Add 10 to Celsius, which is updating the selector. कहाँ है? Add 10 to Celsius, which is updating the selector. अब ये problematic था. When I click on this, is it adding 10 over here? Let's see. No, it is not. कुछ और ही हो गया यहाँ पे, तो minus हो गया in fact. So the logic that I removed, the other side. Yes, exactly. Sorry, my bad. This would be the, मैं explain करूँगा अभी 2 मिनट में बस. Basically इतना शायद समझ आ जाएगा. The extra code that is present over here is something weird. We'll get to what this is. But this much do we understand? कि I have a website. When I click on add 10 to Celsius, ये 10 से ऊपर जा रहा है और ये भी कुछ change हो रहा है, of course, because one depends on the other. Working perfectly. When I click on add 10 to Fahrenheit, Fahrenheit will go up by 10. The other one will also be updated. So everything is working as expected. Question is, one of these is a selector. One of these is a derived value. This Celsius thing is a derived value. How can I update a derived value? ये तो इसका तो कोई वजूद ही नहीं था. This तो depended on the guy above. So the way you can do that is by adding the setter over here, which will यहाँ पे, even though this is a selector, you can still get a setter on it. Only thing is, setter इसकी value को update नहीं करेगा. Setter will update the underlying parent atom. You as the developer have to write the logic. कि यार अगर गलती से एक डेवलपर ने इस पर सेटर कॉल कर दिया तो हमें इसके पेरेंट को अपडेट करना है. वी हैव टू अपडेट दिस गाय विद द न्यू वैल्यू. इसकी न्यू वैल्यू क्या है जो बंदा अपडेट करने को कह रहा है, into 9 divided by the opposite of this algorithm, because this algorithm converts Fahrenheit to Celsius. This algorithm converts Celsius to Fahrenheit, which is what needs to get stored over here. वो फिर से उल्टा हो जाएगी मैथ यहाँ पे. The original value will come here. कुछ को समझ आएगा, कुछ को नहीं समझ आया होगा. Read through this. It's good. This I am happy to discuss it in offline video. ये थोड़ा जल्दी हो गया ना. तो this, when I am discussing selector family and atom family, I will discuss set as well. Set on a selector. Even though rarely will you use this, but okay, we should still discuss this. And for those of you who did understand this, kudos. You're smart. For those who did not, that's fine also. And specifically, did you understand this is the most beautiful bit? So try to understand this. This basically says कि यार अगर आप गलती से यहाँ पे उल्टा भेज दो ना, if to the selector you pass temp f plus 10, वो चेक कर लेगा कि आपने अगर फ़ारेनहाइट ही भेजा है तो मुझे ये मैथ करने की ज़रूरत नहीं है. If you have sent me a Fahrenheit, I will simply update it as it is. If you have sent it to me in Celsius, then I will update it the other way. Cool. Sorry, off track. I think this I will cover in an offline video as well. Great question. This I saw, I think, yesterday also. Pretty good. Done. This also I saw yesterday. I think I did tag Sargam. I did not. Let me tag him. But I told you, it's like a P1, P2 issue. Oh no, something else. Oh, and optimize the admin panel. That part I did not see. What did you optimize in the admin panel? Oh, no, that's not the admin panel. Sorry, my bad. I thought that's the admin panel. What did you do in the admin panel? Sorry, I don't see anything. All right. Project for portfolio. Looks decent. UI is nice. Now I will go and get your credentials. Demo pass. Yeah, it's pretty decent. Like URL shortener. Beautiful. Automatically HTTPS came. Clicked enter, automatically it came. Immediately it give the URL. Go to the URL. It comes. Very nice. Good portfolio project. I would look at this like, हाँ इसने बना तो लिया है. Now I would dive into the architecture. कि अच्छा बना तो लिया है. अब बताओ how are you calculating analytics, because that is a difficult bit here. Seems like this is working also. And how are you calculating the clicks, because here you can do 10 different things. You can directly hit the database or do something else. What if a million people hit this URL? How are you making sure million people are latency बहुत कम होनी चाहिए, वरना people will not use your application. They will simply share this link. Then I'll ask these questions. But the project is good enough for me to be like, मजा आया, like that. So great. And pretty good. How are you doing metadata extraction? And where are you storing all of these? How are you storing all of these? एकदम से हो रहे हैं, synchronous हो रहे हैं, asynchronous हो रहे हैं, things like these. Great question. I will explain in an offline video. Hopefully, little bit of the discussion you understood. Core selling application. Again, as I said, this I wouldn't look at too much and use close. मजा नहीं आया. UI fix करो थोड़ा. Then I will look at it. Done. And anything added over here? Nothing. Oh, updated. You can check the pic below. It's still too specific. Okay, makes sense. Please see the GitHub link, and many people face this issue. Okay. Anyone who's on WSL, you will not get HMR by default. You will have to update the server config. HMR is not working in WSL2. The way to fix it was the thing that this person posted here a while back. But long story short, you have to do this. And it's great that no TA was able to help you out. So you figured out this issue yourself. And now so much you learned in the process and went through the issue. For other people, you have to add this. And I think there was another thing I forgot. But basically go through these issues and they'll help you figure out how, if HMR is not working for you, if your page isn't automatically refreshing in React as you make your changes, you might have to, update your Vite config a bit. And this is how to do it. All right. Whew, quite a class. 10:20. I think we'll end it here, guys. Thank you all for joining. I will see you guys next week and in a few offline videos. Until then, take care and, have a good night. Bye-bye. Oh, webinar. You're right. Thank you. Oh, bach gaye. 228 people here. Great. Trying to do it. I totally forgot. Harkirat and webinar is, what we're saying. Start meeting. Thank you. I forgot. Copy link. And, oh boy, what's happening? Oh, there you go. Alrighty. There you go, guys. Can you guys please come here and chat a little bit? Don't spam chat. Thoda chat do. Video is stuck. Video will be stuck. And that is fine. Because it's stuck on the producer side only. Like it's stuck on my... Oh, there you go. Now video should be up. Hello. Now video should be stuck. Now video should be up. So, thoda kuch chal raha hai abhi. But everything other than that looks pretty decent. I like that it slowly opens up the chat. Can you guys hear me and see me? Hear me and see me, good hai ji. Oh, I should share it with the folks as well who have created it. They asked me to share it with them. Where are the folks? Webinar. All right. So everything is working. Video quality is messed up. I know. We'll fix that. But other than that, working. All right. No video. Someone said. Okay, just screen not visible. That is fine. I'm not sharing screen. That's why. Someone spamming. We can hear you. Can you guys see me as well? Voice is bit distracting. Oh, sorry. I'm sending audio in two places. So let me mute myself in Zoom. Is it better? Hello, hello, hello. Now you should be able. Okay, good. All right, that's pretty good. Yeah, we'll change the whatever video output quality, things like these. But now hopefully it should be good. And yes, making it go lang. Nice. Big messages, echo, big messages, aspect. Yeah, aspect ratio is messed up. It's an issue. Video is stretched. Yes, that is an issue that's being fixed. Anything else? Anything else looks good. So you guys can see me and hear me. Good. Why this webinar? Oh, we're just testing this platform. Zoom is expensive AF, so there's this others something. I'll share eventually why. But it seems like 100 people are here. Everyone can see. So it's scaling as expected, which is great. Everything else can be fixed. The only thing is it scaling video well, which seems like it is. Some people said lag, but okay. I think this is a good test for me today. Thank you all for joining. And if I ho, to fir puch lo koi sawal yaar. I'm happy to answer questions now since you guys are here. Audio quality is not good. That's probably my mic. I mean, that's fixable problem if that is the case. Video paused. Video lagged. Video is kind of stretched. I know it's not media, so no, it's not that difficult. Pretty simple. No lag, that is good. Lag and stutter, that is bad. Full screen of course. UI will change a lot. The goal is to can you guys hear and see me for now? Is the video fine? Everything else is fixable. Diwali bonus. Akash is here, I see. UI to of course will change. Someone said UI mein maza nahi aaya. You guys are coming back at me. Nice. Yeah, I know. We should fix that. All right, cool guys. That is it. We'll call it here. Thank you all for joining. We'll fix this by next week, and let's do a better, proper demo next week then. Cool. Tagging feature, things like this. Yeah, we'll do that. Cool. Thank you, folks. Have a good night. Bye-bye. Sorry about that. Thank you everyone on Zoom. Have a good night. Bye-bye.